Good evening and welcome to FTV GameNight. I'm Chris Edel and this is Stephen Dixon.
How you doing, Chris?
Great. How are you doing tonight, Stephen?
Great, thanks.
All right. Well, tonight we'll be talking about the Heisman front runners so far, who will be the last undefeated team in the NFL, and then we'll bring Pearson Fowler in to talk about Clemson and its chances to beat potentially Alabama or Oregon. Join us for more FTV after the break. Welcome back to FTV GameNight. All right, Stephen, let's talk about Heisman front runners. Who do you have for this?
I'm going to go with Jameis Winston, the freshman, or the redshirt freshman out of Florida State. Kind of reminds me of what RG3 was doing maybe 2 years ago, completing more passes than interceptions. He just has a ridiculous completion percentage. Not throwing many interceptions, throwing for a lot of touchdowns, breaking tackles, showing his athleticism. You saw the Hail Mary against Boston College this past weekend. He had like 4 touchdowns, 1 pick, having a great season. And I think he has a chance to really beat some good teams in Clemson, Florida State, and they have a chance to win the ACC. That could really kind of propel him to the top. And let's just face it, the mass media, ESPN, Fox Sports, they really like this kid because he's an exciting guy to watch. Who do you think?
I'm going to pick Tajh Boyd from Clemson. I also think he's an exciting player. He's had a great career at Clemson, beat a very good, though inexperienced defense in Georgia early on. I think he'll continue to play very well. He's got 9 touchdowns, almost 1,000 yards already. Doesn't really turn the ball over much. He's athletic and he can make plays outside the pocket, rush if he needs to. And I think he kind of carries the weight on this offense, and he makes up for Clemson's lack of an elite defense, and he just wins football games.
Do you think people will discredit what Tajh Boyd does just because he has the weapons that he does offensively?
Well, I mean, obviously it helps to have those weapons, but the plays always start with him. And if he wasn't as skilled as he was and didn't make the right decisions, then Clemson's offense wouldn't be as elite as it is.
Yeah. Do you think when they play South Carolina, Florida State, these tough teams, I'm kind of skeptical. I mean, we saw them play well against Georgia, obviously, where they put up almost 40 points. I think actually they did put up 40 points, 41 exactly. But when I see them play Florida State, South Carolina, I really want to see how he responds against defenses that are just a bit better than Wake Forest. Because, yeah,
Right.
You put up 56 points on a team that probably won't be bowl eligible for the next 5 years. And Wake, they had their run a few years ago. I also don't see the media hype around Tajh Boyd that you will see around Winston, Braxton Miller, Mariota out of Oregon. Lots of those players. I think Tajh Boyd is almost too consistent for his own good, and you'll see a weak ACC schedule and the lack of hype, I think, take advantage. What do you think of that?
Well, I think Clemson's ranked number 3, and if they continue to be undefeated, they'll get more media coverage. Obviously, the 8-0 start and then just having a terrible finish to the season a few years ago, maybe people are thinking about that before talking too quickly about Clemson's chances to go on for an undefeated season. But if he beats South Carolina, Florida State, or both of them, then I definitely think we'll see him in the top 3 at the end of the year.
Big question now. Do you think Tajh Boyd and the Tigers, do you think they beat Florida State and South Carolina?
I think Florida State, they can. Maybe if Winston has his season continue the way it is, maybe that won't happen. South Carolina, I would have said they couldn't beat them at the beginning of the season, but watching the Gamecocks play the way they've done the past few weeks in the game against Georgia, honestly, I think that one's a toss-up. But give Carolina a slight advantage because the game's in Williams-Brice.
Yeah, so we think Tajh Boyd will play well. And now, do you have any skepticism regarding my guy?
Well, no, I mean, I like what he's been doing so far. I don't think he's played the strongest opponents, but then again, not very many players have yet. So maybe it's too early to tell, but I definitely think he could be in the conversation throughout the rest of the year.
Any other guys, kind of dark horse players?
Honestly, I'd say maybe Mike Davis, running back from South Carolina, would be a dark horse. He's playing with a team that, previously hasn't really focused on the passing attack except with Alshon Jeffrey a few years ago. Connor Shaw is injured. We're not sure about his status, so maybe we've been leaning on Mike Davis, and I think maybe that'll continue through the season. And he's got a mask of defense that's just made a lot of mistakes so far.
Yeah, I really like that pick as well. Mike Davis, he's one of those guys. I think Carolina's going to need him to play well because, you have Dylan Thompson, very serviceable backup. A lot of people actually think he might be better than Connor Shaw.
Right.
But they're really going to need to run the ball a little more to be more consistent offensively, less turnovers, play better defense, and that's how you win in the SEC. That's at least how most teams win in the SEC. You'll see it from Alabama and LSU. That's how they win games. They don't want to get in shootouts with Aaron Murray, Georgia, and those type of teams. But I have a player that, might go undefeated the rest of the season. They already lost to Alabama. Johnny Manziel won it last year. Do you think he has a chance to win it, or is there just too much going against him because of what happened this summer?
Honestly, I think if his stats continue the way he started and he has a similar season last year, I don't see why not. Obviously, character issues over the summer, a lot of drama about that, but people like the stats he puts up and how he plays the game, and some people think he's one of the best quarterbacks to ever played college football, and I don't see why he wouldn't be in that conversation.
I wouldn't say he's one of the best quarterbacks, but he's one of those guys, he just makes plays that other guys can't make. Like you saw the play against Alabama.
Definitely.
He literally scrambles 10 yards back, or more than that, he felt like 15,
Yeah.
throws off of his back foot, which is a huge no-no. Throws it into triple coverage and completes it. You just don't see that from other quarterbacks, and I think there's an excitement factor that we love from the Heisman Trophy winner. And that's kind of going back to my thing against Taj Boyd. I think he's so consistent. He's such a good decision maker. He doesn't make those super exciting plays. Really, Sammy Watkins and the other receivers on Clemson make those spectacular plays for Taj Boyd, and I think that's going to be kind of the downfall of Taj Boyd's Heisman candidacy. I think he's going to be invited to New York. I don't think he's going to be the Heisman Trophy winner. So anything else you want to talk about? Any more topics?
Nope. Join us after the break, and we're going to talk about who the last undefeated team in the NFL will be. Good evening and welcome back to FTV GameNight. Now we're going to be discussing who we think the last undefeated team in the NFL will be. Steven, what's your take?
I have the Patriots. I'm going to kind of go against the grain here. Let's just say that. Mm-hmm. Everybody's picking the Broncos. Peyton Manning just putting up unbelievable numbers. I think he has 15 touchdowns, no picks. It's 16, excuse me. It's unbelievable. And the Patriots haven't impressed anybody, but here's the thing. Denver hasn't really played anybody up to the level of the competition. Neither has New England. And New England hasn't impressed anybody, but let's just say this. New England continues to play nobody on their schedule. The toughest team they have is Miami at home. Not digging Denver, especially when they go on the road to Kansas City, just to certain places. Indianapolis on the road, I think week 7 on Sunday night. That's a tough game for them. I think just from strength of schedule, the New England Patriots will be the last remaining undefeated team, and a lot of people will be shocked by that because New England doesn't feel like a 4-0 team right now. They feel almost like 2-2 the way they just have kind of sputtered offensively. Their defense still has major question marks, but this is an odd year in the NFL. I think the New England Patriots will make it to 9-0, actually. So, who do you have?
Well, I agree with you, and I think that New England's they obviously haven't played very well, but I'm impressed by how Tom Brady's found that way to win. But I think the Vince Wilfork injury is going to hurt their defense a lot. I'm going to go with the Kansas City Chiefs. If I'd said this before the season, I think everyone would have thought I'm crazy, but I really like what Alex Smith is doing. Jamal Charles is a fantastic back. A great defense with a lot of Pro Bowlers. Solid special teams. And I just think Kansas City, they've got a pretty easy schedule for the next 4 weeks or so. I don't really see them stumbling. And I honestly think, except for Denver in the AFC, they're one of the better teams.
So do you think Kansas City could beat Denver?
I think they can beat Denver, but I don't think anyone's going to beat Denver if Peyton Manning continues this incredible start that he's gotten going.
Well, like I said earlier, I don't think Denver, let's face it, I don't think they've played very good defenses. They've played Oakland. They played the Giants. We've seen how impressive they've been. And then they played, I said the Raiders, I said the Eagles and the Giants. Those are three terrible defenses. The only impressive team they've beaten is the Baltimore Ravens, and they've shown signs of mediocrity.
Right.
So I want to see them play, a team like the Colts, Dolphins, even the Chiefs, teams that play better defense than what they've seen this season. I think the Chiefs, they play that man-to-man coverage. You have Brandon Flowers, Tom Bali rushing the passer, Dontari Poe's playing a lot better. That defense is nasty. A lot of people are just talking about Jamal Charles and Alex Smith and how well they're playing. That defense is very, very good, a lot better than what Andy Reid had in Philadelphia. That could be a big problem for the Broncos. You can't even say that they're favorites in the AFC West yet, can you? Because the Chiefs are playing extremely well.
Lights out right now.
Yeah, but I think the Patriots will eventually work their way up to win the AFC East. The Miami Dolphins, kind of right behind them. They'll contend until the end. But the way I look at the Patriots' schedule, their only tough game I see on that schedule is the Miami Dolphins at home. And I think they take that just for the fact they're playing in Foxborough.
Definitely.
So with that, in the NFC, you really have the Saints and the Seahawks. And of those two teams, which one do you think would win? Or not win, but which one will be the last undefeated team remaining in that of those two teams?
Honestly, right now, I'd say the Seahawks are probably a better team, but I think they're kind of, if they play at home or if they play on the road, is very telling of if they're going to win that game. And I think they'll stumble on their road trip to Indianapolis before the Saints lose a game.
I mean, I don't know if they'll stumble on their road trip to Indy. I'm going to pick Indy to win this weekend anyway, but you never know. I said they were going to lose at Houston last week, and we saw what happened. He looked like David Carr, but Matt Schaub threw that pick six to Richard Sherman inexplicably. But one thing I'm going to say here is when the Seahawks go on the road to an East Coast team, or at least in Central Time, and they play a 1 o'clock kickoff, that team struggles. Russell Wilson has not impressed me at all this season.
No,
there's big questions on that offense. That defense has bailed them out. The Saints last night showed two things. They showed great defense against Ryan Tannehill. They made him turn the ball over a few times. And then you saw, obviously, the offense and what they can do against a pretty good Dolphins defense. Jimmy Graham just had an unbelievable day. Nearly beat me in fantasy football. I had a 30-point lead. I only had like a 2-point win. Yesterday, Jimmy Graham got like 28 points. That's a team in the NFC. I'd say the Saints. So in the NFC, the Saints will be the last undefeated team. And to me, the Patriots will be the last undefeated team in the AFC. But neither one is the best team in their conference.
Right.
Would you agree?
Yeah. Definitely.
So you got the Chiefs and the Saints as your last two teams in each conference.
Right, yeah.
So anything else you want to talk about?
Well, who do you think of those four teams who has the best chance to make the Super Bowl and make it all the way?
I mean, you got to love Denver and Peyton Manning, but I don't love their defense. Obviously, Von Miller hasn't made it back. We don't know when he'll actually be back and be Von Miller again, the way he was playing last year, but taking the first half of the season off might be a big deal. You saw it last year with the Ravens and Terrell Suggs. People forgot how good he was. Right now, from what I see from the Saints, they look a lot like that team from 2011. I thought they were better than the 49ers that year. They look like a tough team to beat in that Superdome. They're way ahead of the rest of their division, the Bucs, Panthers, and Falcons. I like the Seahawks too, but Russell Wilson scares me in the postseason because you got to have the quarterback play. So right now, I think the Saints in the NFC and the Denver Broncos in the AFC. Just because I'm not impressed from what I see in New England, I still think they're the last undefeated team just for the strength of schedule part of it. But Denver is the best team in the AFC of those undefeated teams.
All right. Well, Pearson Fowler will be joining us after the break as we discuss if Clemson can beat Oregon or Alabama. Welcome back to FTV GameNight. Now we're going to discuss some Clemson football where we're joined by Pearson Fowler. All right. Clemson in its chances against a potential matchup against Alabama and Oregon. What are your thoughts, Steven?
Okay, they're number 3 in the country, and we've seen Clemson. They've obviously been impressive. You saw them blow Wake Forest out of the water last weekend. Taj Boyd looks like a Heisman Trophy candidate. We talked about that earlier in the show. I think Clemson could possibly beat Alabama or Oregon just because of the weapons they have offensively, and they're an offense that doesn't make a lot of mistakes. And those other teams are one of those teams, or Oregon and Alabama. What they do is they benefit from the other team's mistakes. They're well coached. I think Clemson is just as well coached under Dabo Swinney. I think they could give Alabama or Oregon a run for their money. I don't think they'd be favored, and I don't think that's right for them to be favored.
Right.
They have a chance. What do you think, Pearson?
All right, well, I just want to say that win over Wake Forest is one of the most impressive wins I've ever seen against a Wake Forest dynasty that has just been consistently ranked, in the top 100 every year for the last, couple years. Just really outstanding victory for this Tiger team. But in all seriousness, no, I don't think they can compete with Alabama or Oregon for several reasons. One, you mentioned the coaching. No. Just no.
Wait. Okay, they did beat a Georgia team, right?
They beat a Georgia team at home.
All right.
A Georgia team
That beat LSU at home.
They beat a Georgia team that was debuting 8 freshmen on the defensive side of the ball who had never gotten a snap before in college, facing I'm not going to say gimmicky, but an up tempo, lots of screens, slants, hit you quick, like Southern Miss of a couple years ago, like a North Carolina team that we've seen this year, a bit of a gimmicky offense. 8 freshmen starting on the road in Memorial Stadium.
A very hostile environment. I mean, I think
A very hostile
Death
environment.
Valley might be one of the hardest places to play in all of
And
college
Memorial
football.
Stadium's tough to play at too.
But you said it last week in last week's show that LSU, or at least our radio show, you said LSU could beat Alabama.
I
You did
absolutely
say
think
that.
so.
You think Zach
Absolutely.
Mettenberger is the
I
best
still think
quarterback in
so.
the country, right?
I didn't say that, but
Or one of the best.
he's having an outstanding year. He's
Yeah.
having a year reminiscent of A.J. McCarron's year last year.
Okay, so LSU could beat Alabama, and LSU lost to Georgia, who lost to Clemson. So why
Playing
can't
Georgia
they compete?
at home. Playing Georgia at home.
But they're going to be. But Clemson and Alabama are going to be playing on neutral fields if they do play.
If Georgia played Clemson next week, Georgia would win.
Really?
Absolutely. And the comment that I made about LSU beating Alabama had less to do with how good LSU is, even though I still think LSU is a very good team, and more about the matchup problems that this LSU team would create for Alabama that a lot of other teams wouldn't be able to create that matchup opportunity. Here's the other thing, since we're talking about Clemson, we diverged a little bit there. Clemson, they have the personnel on offense to win in a shootout, which is how they beat Georgia. But you put them against a team like Alabama or a team like Oregon. The problem with Alabama is that Alabama is just far better defensively than any team they played this year. This Georgia team is not strong defensively. They've given up a lot of points. They gave up 30 to South Carolina. They gave up a lot to LSU. I mean, they're giving up points this year. They're winning in shootout fashion. They wouldn't be in a shootout with Alabama. Alabama can shut them down. They make plays on special teams and on defense. They've scored a lot of points on defense and on special teams. And the other thing about this Clemson team is that they play in the ACC, so they're not getting tested on a week-in, week-out basis. It's easy to get complacent after you beat Wake Forest 56-7.
But would you say the ACC is that much worse this year than the SEC? The SEC's down.
The SEC's down, still a lot better.
Florida
than
lost to
the SEC.
Miami. Georgia lost to Clemson. You can't
Clemson, Florida State, Miami.
Yeah, I'd say, while obviously some of the SEC teams are down this year, I mean, those 3 teams are the only elite teams, if you will, in the ACC, whereas LSU, Alabama, Florida, Georgia, South Carolina, they're all very
Texas
good.
A&M, Ole Miss is pretty good this year. We
Exactly.
don't know if Mississippi State's going to be any good this year.
I mean, we might have just seen Ole Miss get exposed. Though. They got beat 25-0 on the road.
By the number 1 team in the country in Alabama.
Yeah, but you didn't score a single point. I'm not buying Ole Miss as much as I was
Okay,
last
well,
week.
you don't have to buy Ole Miss, but still, Alabama, LSU, Texas A&M, South Carolina, Georgia. Florida losing Jeff Driscoll, that might hurt, but they're still a solid team defensively, always good on special teams. I mean, that right there.
So if Alabama or Oregon were to play Clemson, give the score for each game, what would the score be?
I think Alabama would beat Clemson somewhere in the 27-24 neighborhood.
Okay, that's fair.
That's fair.
I was about to say, I
Oregon-
thought you were going to say 27-3.
No,
and I was just gonna get
Clemson will
mad.
score their points. They're a
Yeah.
great offense. Taj Boyd, great quarterback. Years of experience running this offense. He's got great weapons around him. especially Sammy Watkins. Pretty good offensive line as we've seen this year. So they can absolutely score their points, but they're not going to have they wouldn't have their way with an Alabama defense like they did with a young, undermatched Georgia defense earlier this year. And against Oregon, I think it would be a bit of a higher scoring affair.
And I think Clemson would match up better in that game.
They would match up better with Oregon and Alabama, I agree. But as far as teams that can win a shootout, I think of Georgia, I think of Clemson, I think of Oregon, and I think of all those, Oregon is the best. And Oregon would, it would be like a 45-41 kind of game, like the Big 12 when Sam Bradford and Colt McCoy were in there. Just a fiasco offensively.
And no defense.
Absolutely.
I think Clemson being ranked in number 3 in the country is very fair. I think they're one of the elite teams, but then I see Alabama and Oregon, and I agree with Pearson. I don't think they would beat them, but I think at the same time, you can't rule them out. I mean, last year, no one expected Clemson to beat LSU in the Chick-fil-A Bowl. Obviously, like a great win there. I think Alabama's defense is one of the best in the country, obviously, and I don't think Clemson's offense can compete. And then I see Oregon's offense, and I see something similar to Clemson, but it's just faster, better, and I don't think there. But I wouldn't be surprised, and I think it'd be very close, like you said.
See, I'm curious to see because we've never seen Oregon play a team, I think, is this on the same caliber as Clemson, only when they play the Big Ten champ or Stanford, and they've lost some of those games, especially against Stanford.
Right.
Let's be honest.
Them matching up with Stanford is completely different than matching up with Clemson.
No, but
it's
I'm saying
comparable to them playing Alabama.
I'm saying like athletic ability, just physicality on both sides of the ball. Clemson, I think, would play. They'd have a good chance of winning the Pac-12. So the argument that's saying Oregon is a much faster team than Clemson, we don't really know that because we haven't seen Clemson really play the likes of an Oregon, like that style of offense. I think Clemson would fare very well against Oregon because I think they have the ability to move the football down the field, and I think their defense would play better against a team like Oregon than they would actually against a physical offensive line like Alabama. I think where Alabama comes in is really Clemson would try to make it a high-paced game. You know how they run a lot of hurry-up offense? Like, remember, I kept saying Oregon would be a tough matchup for Bama because they run that quick offense. They're running a lot of plays. Alabama has a very big defense. I think Clemson eventually would wear down the Alabama defense, and it would turn into a shootout type of game. I think Clemson could beat both of them. I still think, obviously, Oregon and Alabama, out of just respect, deserve to be the favorites in those games because they've looked better, especially last year. But I think nowadays, or this season, you have to give some credit to Clemson and say they have a very, very good chance of winning the national title. I think what's really their biggest test the rest of the season, they have 2 of them, Florida State, South Carolina, and those are really 2 offenses that are really going to prepare them against the likes of Oregon and Alabama. Florida State, you're going to be facing an awesome passing attack, an awesome offense. It's going to be a really high-scoring game. And then South Carolina, you're going to be facing that physical SEC defense. Obviously, you've played those type of teams. You're putting yourself in a position to where you're prepared for an Oregon and Alabama. I think it would be an extremely exciting national championship.
For me, though, Clemson's going to have to win both of those games against Florida State and South Carolina. If they lose either one of those, especially the South Carolina game, then they're just out of the national championship because they have had such a weak road. Whereas a team like Alabama or Oregon or even Georgia, Georgia already has a loss. They can recover from that loss, partly because it was early in the season and also partly because it was against a good team. But I think Clemson's going to have to win all their good games because they only have 3 of them.
Yeah.
All right. Well, that's all the time we have tonight. Thank you very much, and join us next week for FTV Game Night.